Well, hello. Welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. Beginning as the Fabulous Continentals in 1962, this Moses Lake, Washington band, after a few changes, settled on the lineup of Chuck Warren on bass, Bob Gallaway on drums, and my two guests today, Mardig Sheridan on guitars and Mike Balzotti on keyboards. In the mid-60s, they rechristened themselves the Bards, jumping on the British invasion bandwagon, adopting the clothing style, haircuts, and even speaking with Liverpool accents. The Bards went out in full force, playing live shows, appearing on radio, and recording several singles, eventually developing their own musical style before calling it a day in 1969. One of these tracks, The Owl and the Pussycat, based on writings of the English poet Edward Lear, created quite a stir and controversy at the time. Hopefully my guests will shed some light on this, as well as working with producer Curt Boettcher and many more interesting stories. And thankfully in 2002, the only album was reissued on the Moses Lake as the Moses Lake recordings on Gear Fab Records. Well, welcome, guys.
Hey,
good to be here.
Thanks for joining me. All right, we made it happen. We're going to make it happen. I'm not going to assume, jump to conclusions yet. Before we start, tell us where Moses Lake is, in Washington, where it's located.
Good question. Moses Lake is situated halfway between Seattle and Spokane, approximately halfway. It's out in the desert of Washington State, which most people that aren't from Washington find it hard to believe there's a desert in Washington, but there is, of rolling hills. And yeah, it's stuck right there in the middle of the state, next to a lake, kind of a carp-filled mud hole, but quite big lake called Moses Lake. Moses was a chief. Chief Moses was an Indian chief, and it was named after him, close to the Cooley Dam, not too far from Cooley Dam. And down the road is Walla Walla in one direction, in Oregon, and the other direction. Then if you go north, you go to Canada. So it's kind of right in the middle of the state.
Okay, yeah.
There were about 12,000 people that lived there at that time. When Mike and I were there, I was an Air Force kid. I got there because it was an Air Force base there.
And actually, your Air Force base, I think, doubled the population pretty much, as I recall.
Yeah, well, there were a lot of us.
Yeah,
there was the typical Air Force kids, and then the town kids, the townies and the Air Force kids. And so there were, regular brawls, and very small town stuff.
Yeah. But, like you said, most people, when they think of Washington, they think of all the trees, and then the coast and all that. Yeah, they don't think of a desert or that kind of a barren area like that.
A lot of farming.
Yeah. So you were both born in Moses Lake?
No, right? I was an Air Force kid.
Okay.
I was moved all my life and just ended up there it was Larson, wasn't it? Larson Air Force Base in Moses Lake. And that's where I went to high school. And then that's where I met Mike and where I got involved with the band. And then I stayed when the family moved on.
Oh, okay. Got you. All right.
I was born in Boston and moved to Moses Lake when my parents got divorced. And it was culture shock. I mean, I'd never worn a pair of jeans. And, in Boston, you always stood up and, when the teacher came in the room, good morning, Miss Marston. Moses Lake was, cowboy kids and Air Force brats. So culture shock.
It was a shock for you. Well, how about early memories for both of you hearing music played in the house, that kind of thing?
Mike?
When you were like a child? Yeah.
Yeah, well, the Beatles were really big, for me, and the whole British sound really resonated and was something that you'd really listened to. It just stood out from everything else. And of course, there was the others. The Beach Boys was kind of the American version of a real pop band. And I always liked pop music.
Yeah. Before that, for me, I mean, I remember having all of Roy Orbison's stuff.
Okay.
You know, those early days. He was kind of my favorite. I remember some years ago, I took my wife to see him at the Seattle Coliseum. That's where we live now, is Seattle. And boy, I sat there with tears rolling down my face. My wife was looking at me like, what is going on? But for me, I was 7 or 8 years or 9 years, or however old I was, listening to, Roy Orbison and those pipes and everything. And it was just, for me, it was like brought it all back. And, I have that, I've heard a lot of people tell the same story, which is true. I had a little transistor radio, which we all had in those days, made in Japan, a little transistor. And at night, I'd have to go to bed, and then I would pull up the covers and then listen to my transistor radio and listen to music and dream about being a musician. Playing and singing.
I'm probably about 10 years behind you guys, I would say. I had one too, and I remember in 68, 69, hearing Leaving on a Jet Plane, and then also the Beatles, what was the song? Something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember hearing that on the little transistor. Yeah, brings back memories. Well,
and 45s were huge.
Yeah.
I was my dad, my real dad, that we moved from Boston to Moses Lake to get away from, I guess my mom did. He was a CPA, but he worked for DeMambro Radio Supply. And so I had access to tape recorder and electronic equipment back in the day.
Yeah.
So, matter of fact, I'll tell one of myself, born in 47, that was actually the year the transistor was invented.
Right?
Changed everything, of course.
Yeah, yes, it did. Well, did either one of you come from a musical family? Any musicians in the genes?
My dad played by ear. He played piano by ear, and I wouldn't say that I had that particular gift, but something I think I share with Mardig is that we were really good at taking apart tracks. We'd listen to music, and in order to emulate it for gigs, because we were a pop band, we would take it apart and teach the parts actually to the bass player and the drummer.
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't so easy then either, because we had to drop it on, all you had to do was the record.
Right.
And we really were a garage band. Our drummer, Bob Gallaway's garage was our rehearsal hall. And in Moses Lake in the winter is not a place you want to be. I mean, it's cold and it's snowy. And so, we would be in there with little space heaters and a record player, you'd have to drop it on, and somebody would lift it up, and then Mike would, pick out the notes, and then you drop it on and pick out, and we had to, that's how we had to learn. That's how I do, actually, that's how my ear got trained. I still play now for fun. And I just play with the internet. I play with the music I like the best. I put it on, make it put on a playlist, listen to it, and it's easier now because I can loop it. And I take my guitar and I pick it out, pick out the chords and everything, and play along. So ear training was good.
It was good, yeah. I didn't ever take lessons or learn to play the guitar, but I was a mean air guitarist. I mean, I was with the tennis racket. Oh yeah, I mean, I could tear it up. But
I always felt like I was a guitarist too, because my piano style was kind of the Elton John chord structures. Marty mentions picking out the chords. To this day, I'd be better off if we were gonna play a song, give me the guitar chord charts, because then I'll develop what I call counter melodic themes, which is kind of like a rhythm section it's kind of like rhythm. I was Mardig's rhythm guitar on the keyboard, basically.
Okay, so you didn't take any.
Really, the guy that picked everything out, though, like them vocals especially. He was the one that would figure out the vocals for us. He really was. And you had training too, because you came, I mean, you were trained in school, you were a pianist, you could read. So okay. The rest of us, and Mike and Chuck was too. Chuck was also a music, you know, played music in school and played stand-up bass in school. And so Mike was kind of the one that was responsible for putting together our vocal charts, you know, could kind of find those. So.
Right. Well, Mardig, at what age did you start playing guitar?
I started when I was 12. My dad bought me just a piece of junk for $2 from an airman in Goose Bay, Labrador, which is where we were stationed at the time. And he gave it to me. And I'll never forget that night, I just laid in bed and I kept strummed the guitar, listening to it. And then I went down and strummed it for him. And he said, come back when you learn how to play something. So I guess that's when I started, was 12. And, you know, and then I would go and I'd go to the teen clubs and the clubs on the bass. And there was some good players. And then I'll never forget the first guy I saw playing a Fender Jazzmaster, and he was really good. And I remember sitting in front of him, you know, just intently watching what he was doing, you know, and then I would, you know, go and try to, you know, figure out how to do that. So yeah, that's when I started.
All right. Well, fast forward a little bit. Were the Continentals your first band?
They were Mike is really responsible.
Yeah, it was. I was when my mom moved to Moses Lake, she married a dairy farmer, and so I had lots of reasons to want to get off the farm, and so at 14 years old, I got in this band. We were actually called the Roadrunners, which became the Fabulous Continentals. I've got a picture of that actually.
It was the Fabulous Continentals.
Yeah, the Fabulous Continentals with Miss Marcia May, don't you know?
The Fabulous Continentals
with Miss Marcia May, don't you know?
Yes.
Yes, I've heard that name. Yes.
Before
those were a little before, I guess, before your time, Greg. Those were the days when all the bands you'd dress in some kind of suit and tie. We had these kind of coats and ties, and you'd dance. You know, you'd stand kind of. The guitar players would stand with their guitars, you know, lined up, and then you'd move like this. You know, we had for years, our whole thing before we'd go out to get on stage, we'd look at each other and say, smile and move around.
Smile, move around. That's still one of my mottos, one of my many mottos.
Smile and move around.
So yeah, your moves were choreographed. Yeah.
Yes. You did, and you did little steps forward, you know, little steps forward, and then 2 to the side, and then 2 over, and step forward, and yeah.
But that point should not be lost. I mean, I don't want to get in the weeds here. We don't have that much time, but that smile move around was not insignificant. I mean, it wasn't just a quip. The show had to go on. So it didn't matter if you had pneumonia, you had to be on stage and smile, move around. And a great life lesson, really.
Well, talk about playing live. I guess since you kind of mentioned that, what do you remember, like one of the smallest crowds you ever played for?
Oh, we played for some small crowds.
Really, I think the more interesting aspect of that, I mean, is that we were young entrepreneurs, and before anybody even knew we existed, we were creating our own venues. You know, we'd hire the cop, we'd rent the hall. My brother would take tickets at the door. I mean, you know, and so we had a few bombs out, but we made some good money just completely, you know, on our own initiative.
Yeah. We would go to, you know, we played all the big spots like Odessa, Othello,
Warden,
all the big places, Walla, Warden, you know, all the big towns. But all the kids, because, you know, that's our boomers. We're all baby boomers, and we didn't drink. We couldn't drink them. We weren't of age. So we all went to dances. That was the thing, is you'd go to Friday, Saturday night dances, and the local
VH Hall, Veterans Hall or
whatever. So we would rent it, and then we would rent the local cop to be there, and then we would get posters made, And then we would drive around the days before, and we would tack these posters onto the telephone poles in that town and all around the town. And then so we did our own promotion. And if we could, if there was a radio station in town, we'd try to get on the radio station. And then every kid in town would come, and they'd pay, and we took the door. We paid the rent, we paid the cop, and we took the door. And we lived fine. I mean, we all had homes and eventually families and stuff. Then it was.
Yeah.
So there were small venues, but they were the only venue in town.
Okay.
If you were going out on Friday night, you were coming to see the Bards.
Well, let me ask you, where did that come from? That self-promotion, the whole idea behind that you guys, I mean, you were on top of it. Yeah. Where did that come from?
I think it was out of need. I mean, it wasn't actually, and I think about it, there wasn't anybody promoting. There wasn't anything that you would call a promoter today, except perhaps in Seattle. And that's where Pat O'Day, which eventually became Concerts West and kind of a big organization, they had venues over there that were the things that everybody wanted to play. So in those days in the Northwest, the big bands were Don and the Good Times, the Kingsmen, the Wailers,
the Sonics,
Merrily and the Turnabouts, the Viceroys. Those were the Seattle bands. And the reason that we eventually got brought to the mountain. The reason that Pat O'Day finally brought us over the mountain was because he was trying to open groups, and he was running groups against us and the venues we were at, and he'd get a different venue in the little town, and no one would go to his. They all came to see us, and he finally said, "Okay, come on over." But when we first started out, I mean, Mike, tell me if you're right. It was kind of because there wasn't, if we were going to play, if you weren't playing a dance for the school, you weren't playing. So I think we kind of invented it, to tell you. I mean,
and there were some elements that, Chuck's mom, I think, had owned a radio station or had part of it or whatever. So we had a venue for advertising. You got to remember that back then it was a Polaroid picture, which you then have to go to a printer somebody to make a print of before you could make posters and then circulate them. And yeah, I mean, some hilarious stories. That car that we were driving, I think it only had third gear, right? It didn't have reverse or.
No. So we got stories forever. Chuck Warren was kind of the dad of the group, right. He was the kind of the de facto leader because he was calm. He still is. Chuck is still Mr. Calm and, takes everything. But he had a 53 Chevy. 53 was it? Yeah, I guess it was.
I think so.
Just one of those round balls. He had a 53 Chevy. It had only second and third gear. Because he lost first gear, and we would take it with the trailer on the back. And I remember, I'll never forget starting off, and he would start it off in second. And I asked him about, was he going to get it fixed? He said, first gear is just a luxury gear.
That's how he felt.
But after that was the thing. First gear is just a luxury gear. You don't need it. And then Mike would use his car once in a while. He had you remember your old Ford?
Yeah. Skyliner.
Yeah. And there was a time we were going to Walla Walla, and the lights went out. His the light, and we couldn't see. And so we were all leaning out the windows, and we would tell him, go left, go to the left, go to the right, because he was just driving. And Gallaway, who was brilliantly funny in his own way, yells out, he says, if you hear gravel, go to the left. If you hear more gravel, go to the right.
I got to bring this up because I forget it. It's too good of a story. So fast forward, and unlike other bands who, got vans and roadies and stuff, we stuck with the idea of we were buying Cadillacs, and we just liked that idea and made a custom trailer with the same wheelbase as a Cadillac with Michelin tires. I mean, we were the circus come to town, the Bards, written really in kind of circus Broadway kind of lettering. But anyway, there was one time when I was in college in Central Washington, is what is now a university, but it was Central Washington State College at that time. and the rest of the band was coming from Seattle too. I think it was Salem or Eugene. And I, like an idiot, I got in a conversation with somebody, missed the flight from Yakima to I guess it was Salem or Eugene, forget which one. So I actually, in my panic, I actually hired a guy to fly a private plane, and he said, "We'll go down there, but there's cloud cover. Now, if I can't land, I can't do instrument landing." And I said, "Okay, here's the money. Take me, get me to the gig on time." He gets over Salem, let's say it was. He dives through this. I'm just terrified. Dives through this hole in the clouds, and we land. I get there, taxi. Get me to the gig on time. I'll pay for the ticket. Go rolling up there, and the band's not there. The Cadillac blew a piston. Remember that, Mardig? The car broke down. The Cadillac broke down. I mean, what are the chances of both of those things happening? And we actually did play, I think, a final set there.
I made it late. I remember we had to we rented a thing and rented a car. Yeah, it was hell. You had to go. I mean, that's something that Mike was saying earlier. There wasn't, we're sick, we can't make it. Yeah. There wasn't even an individual, I'm sick, I can't make it. That was unheard of.
I see roads, didn't matter.
Yeah, unheard, didn't matter. You're going to, the band had a gig to play, and that's what you did. And I think musicians from our era are horrified to think that people will cancel because they're tired, or something. It's like, that didn't, no.
Right. It didn't happen. No. Well, tell us who Jerry Denon was.
Jerry Denon was he made his bones with Louie, because he had a Northwest label called Sheridan and a couple of Piccadilly and something else. And Louie was a gigantic hit. He was just basically signed everybody. And so if you went into his office, he would just put a contract out and you signed it. And then, God, that leads me to my next best story. And then you would get to record at Carney Barton's studio. Now, Carney Barton's studio was three tracks under the monorail in Seattle. So you had to wait sometimes for the monorail to go by. But he had 3 tracks. And the first time we went in to record, so here we are, 18-year-old kids, and never, we knew nothing. And Carney wasn't there. And we went in to set up, and the studio had baffles, like these booths that had baffles around them, and then kind of an open area. So we set up the way that we would set up on a stage. We put all of our amplifiers together right next to each other and drum there. And then each of us got into a booth and sat there ready to go. So Carney comes in and he looks at us. He goes, no.
And who is the producer, that Bateman guy that ended up, he was throwing darts to the dartboard?
He wasn't there for the first stuff. He was there for Never Too Much Love, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he wasn't there. Our first stuff, which was just atrocious. And we were so scared because the way we would do it in those days, he only had 3 tracks. So to have stereo, any kind of thing, he'd use 2 tracks for the instruments, and then 1 track for vocals. And I had to sing, or Mike, because we did the lead, had to sing the lead and the backgrounds at the same time. And the background vocals, you'd all sing together on 1 mic. And you had to kind of distance yourself to kind of get the right spacing of the, and that was it. There was multi-tracking was not something that he was even capable of in those days. He did end up, I think, getting a 4-track. I think we might have done Never Too Much Love on a 4-track, where I actually got to do the overdub, what they call a mandolin. It's not mandolin, it's just my guitar picking and stuff, with some things like that. So, but it was funny.
Yeah, very, very limiting, like you said. Only 3 tracks like that, which you could do.
And of course, when I hear those things today, I hear the fear. The fear. We probably did them about twice as fast.
Yeah.
I tip my hat to your memory, Mardig. That's fabulous. And my 2 cents is just kind of a pause in terms of just appreciating that your iPhone today is a better recorder, better fidelity than, you know, what we were doing. It's the idea that, you know, it would take a room full of equipment to, well, there weren't even computers, but yeah, the technology that has shifted things so dramatically in so many ways. This was really back in the day.
That's the upside of technology. There's that really awful downside, but we won't go into that. But yeah, and especially, you know, if you had ideas for songs, you know, like lyrics, you know, back then, you know, notes, you know, you had to physically write it down. And then, like you said, with that, now you can record it, you know, when you have an idea, you just.
You're mentioning lyrics. We got that would be a good insert that we didn't care about lyrics at all. That's why that's why one of the reasons we like the name the Bards, because, you know, British minstrels, poets, you know, so our little, on our original music, our one of our claims to fame was taking classic poetry and putting it to music, to rock music the kids could dance to, and we got away with it.
And you got away with it. Well, who was the Edward Lear fan?
Oh, God, where did that come from? I don't remember. Now, Chuck used to bring a lot of those things forward. Again, Chuck was kind of and he still is kind of the researcher of the band. I mean, Chuck still has posters, and he's still got, we have pictures of set lists, you know, that were written that he, you know, would have on his guitar. I think Chuck brought it forward, and then I wrote it. I wrote the music to it. And the reason that you asked why it was banned, we used to say a band in Boston, because, and it's very quaint when you think about it today, because it's the Owl and the Pussycat went to the sea in a beautiful pea green boat and took some money, plenty of honey, and wrapped it up in 5-pound notes. So it's a little children's poem. But there's a part where it says, the owl looked up to the stars above, and he sang to a small guitar, "Oh, lovely pussy, oh, pussy, my love, what a beautiful pussy you are." Band in Boston.
But it also had something to do with the way you sang it, Marty.
Well, I know. And then there was a scream afterwards, probably. And then we came back and did a slow, funky version of it, which is still my favorite thing that we did in the early years. It was really, and Mike does this fabulous organ solo on it. And it was really a cool, funky piece of music. And Capitol Records knew it would be a hit record if it could get played. And they put it out, and we still have it, of course. They put it out on a plain white label.
Okay.
They wouldn't put their name on it because they were afraid of having the Capitol name attached to it. But they knew if it could get played, it would be a hit. And it got played in the Northwest, but it didn't. It literally did get banned. I mean, it was, and we got banned for a Dr. Seuss song years later that Mike wrote called Oobleck. And it's about a coven of witches that are brewing up a new brew of weather. And so we used to do in those days, we did rap before there was rap. We called it spoken word, but we would do talking stuff. And we started off, And we were making sounds and shuffle, duffle, muzzle, muff, and all these things. And the king wanted a new, and then we burst into song. And this is a Curt Boettcher, Keith Olsen production. We burst into song. When we do, we go magic smoke, go high. Marijuana.
Right.
Band in Boston. It was, I mean, and that was the only single that Together Records released with us on it.
That's right. That's right. We'll talk about the Curtis Mayfield cover, Never Too Much Love. Did you think that was too poppy, too commercial? Or did you enjoy the song?
Mike?
You probably have better recollection than I do, Mardik. I just remember it was the flip side of an actual hit that Curtis Mayfield had, and I forgot the genesis of why we just liked it. It was one that Bob sang. Maybe that would have something to do with it because his voice was perfect for it. Yeah, that makes sense. When you give a half an ounce of thought, it was a Bob pick and a smart one, and it was kind of, you know, to put some life into it, we put kind of a psychedelic beginning to it.
Right.
Which actually, you know, commercially, I think really worked for us. And, you know, and then for us, this was pre-Curt Boettcher, and, you know, we somehow pulled off the harmonies. So I guess that was Carney Barton's studio, right?
That was at Carney's. Yeah, that was the last thing that we did at Carney's, and then Capitol Records put it out, and it was, I think it was 37 in cash box or something. I don't remember exactly, but it did well.
Made the top 100, and the best. What I think one of our best stories is marching in. Marty, you'll remember this. Marching into Pat O'Day's office. He was a program director for KJR, and we had we had bullied our way in really to his organization, to Concerts West, by beating him up in Wenatchee, in these Eastern Washington towns. So he knew us, and we brought our record in. We wanted him to play it, and he was very indignant about it. Now, I can't play your record. You're one of my groups, and we're a top 10 breakout station, yada yada yada. And in our righteous indignation, we said, Pat, you will play it. I mean, that's my memory. We marched out of there, and that's when we kind of round two of the posters and stuff. We bought easels. The catch-22 is the stores won't stock your record unless it's playing on the radio. The radio station won't play it unless it's selling in the stores. Catch-22. So we would buy our own records, put it in the stores with an easel on it, go to the radio station, have them pump the record and are playing the gig, and it literally, KJR has a sister station in Spokane called KJRB, and I think a sister station in Portland called KSM, KSM, something like that. Okay, it became a runaway hit, #1 in Spokane. #1, forced Pat onto it, and it became top 10 in Seattle. And I think that's what won us the contract with Capitol Records.
And went also with, and to expand a little on that, when we actually, and this is kind of how, this was, I think, the entrepreneurship that I think we had as young people. I guess Mike and I have always had it. I've never worked for anybody. I've always worked for myself. But we divided up into two guys each, two. And then we said, here's the stations and the towns. And we took a week and we took off across the Northwest with, in the trunk, these easels, and, which we would take into the stores. And we would give them 5 records or something with the easel, the records to sell. And then we would go to the local radio station and get on the air. And that's how we promoted Never Too Much Love, and why it actually took off. And it was, so we were just kind of, I don't know what it was in our DNA, but maybe it was being from Moses Lake and having a chip on our shoulder.
And when you think about it, I mean, it was stone cold brilliant, but it was like just this drive that we had, this resist. I mean, that's all we needed to hear is, we won't play your record, and that was enough to send us out.
Another thing I want to say is like this attitude about, if you want something done right, do it yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And if there were a promotion team, you would have to depend on that, plus pay them. So you guys are doing it yourself, saving that money.
Well, you're even making me think of something else, Greg. It's a great point, because the Seattle bands had access to management and resources. We had none.
Right.
We had nothing. We only had ourselves. So, and I think even there's another element. This is a slight shift of gears here, but I don't think we would have ever come together or stayed together had we not been from Moses Lake. We weren't necessarily a great match, either in terms of talent or personalities, but it worked commercially because of what we did. And then we were kind of almost forced to stay together because the entity was working, and we didn't have the outside influences.
Right. There you go. Very good point. Did you want to add something, Marty?
No, I was just kind of, what Mike was saying was so true, that it actually was kind of what broke us up, because after we recorded with Curt and Keith, and Curt was fascinated by us, because he was used to these beautifully, as harmonic, beautiful song, all this stuff. And I guess we have to tell the story of how we met Curt Boettcher, because it's a pretty good one. We were at Transcontinental Records, which had bought, what was the English label, Mike? Was it Parrot?
Yeah, probably Parrot.
And we were in his, because we had a hit from Capitol, and I don't know why we weren't with Capitol. I don't even remember anymore, but they put us on Parrot, and we were in Mike's office, and we were going to go, and this is going to be our big push. and Transcontinental Records, Mike Curb, who later became the governor of California, was running it at the time. We're sitting in the waiting for Mike. And as we're sitting there, there was this little guy, I think Curt was about this high. And he would peek, and he had kind of some gnomish little face, and he peeked around the corner and he would look at us, and then
Nehru jackets.
And then he, peeked around again with it, and he went like this to me. And so we left. We had the meeting in the big guy's office, and we went, and we were at the 9,000 building on Sunset Avenue that had a glass elevator. So we said, let's go to the top and then down again. So, big thrills. So we go to the top, and as we come down, it stops again at Transcontinental. Curt gets on with Gary Usher, and they were starting Together Records under the Transcontinental label. And he gets on and he looks at us. He says, you're not from here, are you? And we said, no. And he said, where are you from? And I think I lied. I said, Seattle. And then I said, actually, we're from Moses Lake. And he started to giggle. And he said, what are you doing? And we said, well, we had a box we'd made these, what became the album, our garage tapes. And we said, we're, trying to get these. And he said, well, for some reason, he said, why don't you come over tonight and let me listen to it? Really? And he found us so weird. So we have you really must listen if you haven't. We did a 15-minute rock opera called The Creation, which is about the beginning of the world, about Genesis, and was rewritten by a Black man named Johnson, who rewrote it in kind of hip lyrics. And we took that and we made a 15-minute medley, and also we did the spoken word between things. And we were using, to do it, there were two Moog synthesizers in the world, and we were using one of them. They had to be programmed, and you could only play one note at a time. We were on the brand new 16 track with Keith Olsen. That was a new deal at the time. And we did this album, because we had this kind of weird approach that we would do things, Curt was kind of fascinated that he was getting to work with this band that was so different and so garagey in their way, and yet at the time there was a lot of sophistication to what we did as well, really unusual. But it was really that started a whole new thing for us. And then after we did the record, after we did the album, Curt wanted to join the band. Yeah. For Mike and I, it was like, oh my God, we're getting a genius is going to join our band.
About The Creation, let me ask you first, would you, looking back now, would you rather see it come to fruition as a mini rock opera itself, aside from the album?
Let me pause for a second, because I've got in front of me the Stanton Swihart from Perth, Australia review, and it's way too long to read here, but I got to read you this one thing because it's right to your point. He says, and it's impossible to know or even consider, much less call, the album's centerpiece, the 14-minute, 7-part The Creation, mini rock opera, conceptual suite, progressive acid epic, a stoned rewriting of Genesis. Needless to say, it encapsulates in microcosm all that's eccentric about the album as a whole, which is not to suggest that the album deserves its obscurity, only that it's no surprise that a record label of the day would have passed on releasing it, given how willfully non-commercial and non-mainstream it is. Garage purists might come away from the album unsatisfied. There's no Louie Louie here, no The Witch. Nevertheless, the Moses Lake Recordings is an awesome lost gem, always fascinating, always astoundingly good. Even as its most bizarre, it is packed, sometimes a dozen to a song with ideas. Isn't that fabulous?
Yes, that's a great review too.
I loved him for that review. He so nailed it.
Perth, Australia.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know where your music travels.
I know.
And I did went to the site.
You did.
I like the guitar riff on The Creation. I like that guitar.
Yeah. There's some wonderful guitar work. Mardig was the real musician of us.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. That's true. But thank you, Mike. I think Mike was every bit as much a musician, every single bit as much. But I do think we were we basically taught the other two guys their parts. I mean, I sometimes had to learn how to play the drum part so I could show Bob, which he resented. Okay. But, he didn't know how to play halftime. I mean, it took me forever. It was always ding, 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 and he didn't know how to just lay down a funky halftime groove, And then when he did, then that's all he would play. It was like, but it was like, but I think that's kind of getting back to what Mike said about would we have actually become, I think Mike and I probably would. I mean, we still stay tight to this day and still have creative ideas that we play with together. But we were very different in that way. And again, like then when Curt wanted to join us, the other two guys, I think, were scared to death because Curt was not particularly gentle with them when we did the album. He was pretty harsh about their musicianship.
Bob couldn't keep meter,
Yeah, exactly. Elaborate a little bit on the recording sessions with Curt and Keith. Yeah.
A recording session with Curt Boettcher. First of all, it would never start on time.
Okay.
Because that was not a Curt Boettcher thing to be on time. And it would always go till 4:00 in the morning.
Okay.
And Curt was a master of sound. So it wasn't just go in and play. It was even like on the guitar, you'll notice the guitar and all the different sounds. We would play for hours to get a sound. We spent, it's not particular. I don't know what it would be in today's dollars, but it was $100,000 they spent in the studio on making that record, which you kind of hear, when you listen to it.
Well, Keith could pull off those crazy ideas of Curt. That was the incredible thing about their combination. Yeah.
Curt would ask him to do things, and then Keith was a magician, in the studio, and then we'd get these things, and so it was and then when we were singing, Curt would come and he would lead us, in the singing, and I mean, Curt could hear. He would hear anything else. Anybody else would have let it go by, not Curt. I mean, Curt was absolutely, if you know I don't know if you were alive or if you were really listening at the time, but the first time I heard Along Comes Mary, I almost drove off the road. It was like, what? I have just heard the future. But it was, and he was a Brian Wilson aficionado and and worked with Brian Wilson. But working with him was demanding. It was a demanding, exhausting, incredibly rewarding, because when it would happen, it was magic.
Magic, yeah.
He took this crazy group of kids from their, and their insane thinking and molded it, for us, and helped us really mold it into something that was truly different. I mean, and I know it's patting ourselves, but my children, my grandchildren love the music.
Yeah,
I love it. And, it's like, and it's like it's almost like, God, it's almost, they can't even connect their grandpa to it. It's like, kind of like, really? Right. That's you? It's kind of like, because that's awfully hip for you, Papa.
Well, the rock opera aspect is how theatrical it was, because there was the narration part and this black poet's version of the creation. So it had that sort of stylistic aspect to it. And then all these different musical, a lot of variety in the music to interpret the different paragraphs. So, yeah, it was.
You might say a bit ahead of its time, too. Yeah.
Well, I think no question. And the stunning thing, to our credit, was that because we were an established dance band, we were real clear on the fact that, if you couldn't dance to it, if it wasn't familiar, they weren't going to, you'd lose your audience. And so we'd get them all going with our pop music, and then we'd have a section where we did original music, and got away with it. I mean, Mardig, that still blows me away that we got away with that.
Yeah. Interestingly, we didn't get never too much love because of the the beginning of it, with the noise that we made, all the sounds we were making, the idea was you wake up and it's peaceful in the morning, and then you get going with this kind of crazy days, and it was kind of to build to this crescendo of life is so full of, tension and craziness, and then never too much love. See, so that was the concept behind it. But I will never forget watching Dick Bandstand and Dick Clark putting it on Bandstand. It got a 37.5 because you couldn't dance to it.
Couldn't dance to it.
Couldn't dance to it.
The danceometer.
Yeah. One time we didn't smile and move around, and we got slain for it.
Well, off of that album, I think my favorite is Hollow Men. I like that. I like
that. Would be part of the creation. That was intended to be part of the creation, because Hollow Men is, of course, is about T.S. Eliot and the end of the world.
Right.
And so it was actually meant to bookend. So you have the creation, the beginning of the world, and then Hollow Men, which was from T.S. Eliot, which is about the end of the world.
Yeah.
And, the world is not with a bang, but a whimper. I took off when I remixed, and just so you know what you're listening to show you what a brilliant genius Keith was. What you're hearing, the music you're hearing on our website, is from a 7.5 inches per second quarter track rough mix that I took out of the studio and sat in my garage for 30 years before I pulled it out, took it to a studio, and pumped it up so that it is what you hear today. Sonically, it's pretty sound.
It is. You would never know that. You would never know that hearing it. No.
Keith was truly, truly, truly an amazing genius. But I got off the track there. What was I talking about? The reason for that?
The ending, the Hollow Men.
What's that?
The Hollow Men ending.
Oh, this was a Curt thing. He put this long, like a fuse sound on it, and then there was a nuclear explosion. And I deleted it. And Mike and I talked about it and said, we just don't want that to be the way we leave people.
Yeah,
we don't want to leave people with that. So I actually cut that off, but that was intended to be part of it as well. Yeah.
Okay.
But that kind of gets back to your question of, would that be a separate piece? Because other parts of the record are delightful, but it is kind of a, Oobleck and Rainy Days I Had With You, which is, I love. I think it's just a wonderful pop piece of music, but does it fit with the they are very different, from an album theme perspective.
My absolute favorite is where we're kind of riffing, Mardig's lead guitar.
Laredo, yeah.
Well, but no, the part where we go, yeah, that part with Curt. In
the creation.
Yeah, it's that musical interlude, which is, I mean, the vocal on it is stone cold brilliant. It's wonderful, and that's Curt.
Yes, that is nice.
That was a really nifty piece of music. Yeah.
I love Laredo as well. Yeah.
Well, Laredo's where we do the shuffle, the shuffle, boom, 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 boom. That, and then I play lead, and then we all sang the same lead, the guitar lead and everything. That's crazy shit. I mean, it is. Even today, it's crazy shit. Much less 1968.
Right.
What's the word for that? Scatting.
Scatting.
Yeah.
Scatting.
Yeah.
And then we had the piece where Bob does the drum roll, or the drum break, only with his voice.
Bada bing, bada boom.
He does the with his voice. It's like, that's crazy shit.
Yes.
He couldn't play it, but he could sing it.
he was pulling his best Mel Torme. Yeah, he was like.
But it's where.
Yeah. Go ahead.
What's the saying? Necessity is the
mother of invention. Yeah.
Is what?
Yeah. The mother of
invention. So that's kind of that would be a theme you could run from the top of our discussion here all the way through.
That's true.
That's true.
That's very true. And you guys did pull it off. I mean, in so many different ways. Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to ask you too about playing live. Uh, some of the you guys open for some pretty big bands.
Yeah, a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. What any special memories there?
Sure. I mean,
Tommy Rowe, where we
which
got
one?
carried.
Oh
We actually
no.
backed up Tommy Rowe. Mardig's going to throw up, but we because of pure bubble gum. But we actually, I mean, that was the Seattle Coliseum. We actually got screaming girls, hauled off the stage by police.
Oh my
So
God.
that's that memory. And then Mardig, I'll let you take her from there. There were the
Oh
Turtles,
yeah,
and
that was a scary.
Dave
That was
Clark Five.
actually we had never experienced anything like it, where you have little teen girls screaming, ripping at anything that they can get. I mean, we got back in the dressing room and we were torn apart. And we sat in the dressing room for an hour and a half waiting until the crowd outside had thinned out so that we could escape. Remember that? I remember that and going, this
Wow.
is, and it happened a couple of times to us when we were doing those teen concerts and stuff. I remember the things that stand out to me was like with the Young Rascals.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we liked rhythm and blues. We loved black music. That was kind of weird. We were Beatle-ish and
Yeah.
black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
it really was. And so because we
Yeah.
were not a rock and roll band. I mean, I would not call us a rock band at all. And so I remember playing with the Young Rascals and being able to be that close to Felix Cavalieri, and just being like in awe, of someone like that. I mean, those are the ones that what I remember is with the musicians like that, like
Turtles.
Eric Burden in Salem.
Dave Clark Five.
Dave Clark, yeah, but I wasn't impressed with them. I thought they were, I mean, it was fun to be in the same stage, but it wasn't, but they didn't hit me like the bands that were the Turtles.
The Turtles were impressive.
Turtles, yeah, yeah, we play with a lot of bands. I mean, when I stop and think, a lot of groups. My wife is always laugh. She doesn't know me this way. I mean, she now knows my background, but we were married for some time before she, we would watch a Hall of Fame, like a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I'd sit there and go, oh yeah, we played with them, and she'd, huh? What do you mean you played? When did you? Yeah, we did a couple of gigs with them, and soon, and it's like. So yeah, we did play. Who do you remember, Mike? Who was your?
Well, those were the big ones, and the thing that's to put a context in it. Back in the day, when the major group would come to town, they would take a local group on the Northwest tour. And I guess that was still Pat O'Day's Concert West, right? And so we got the pick to be the kind of the warm up act, except for the Tommy Rowe, where we were actually his backup band to boot. Others escape me at the moment, but that was really kind of a pinnacle of performance from a standpoint of
I was going to say real quick when the girl started groping and grabbing at you and stuff, maybe you started thinking maybe we better cool it on the Beatles.
We loved it.
Maybe slow down a little bit, back off from that a little.
Sign that bra, please.
Right.
It's the only time. I mean, it's at least it was an experience that let us know maybe it by nowhere close, obviously, to that experience, but what it would be like to be at that level.
Exactly.
And not entirely sure that that's a desirable thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how many. I mean, there are guys that go in it because that's what they want, is that level of fame. I think most musicians that are serious about their music are in it for the music, and they want people to love it and appreciate it. But it was like Chris Martin the other night was in Seattle. I really appreciated this. He was in Seattle. He brought these 4 young people up to sing with him from Coldplay, and he actually said to the crowd and to them, he said, can you live without, because it's everybody with their phone. And he said, can you live without your phone for like 4 minutes? Right. Because it's like, and even I will go and, I've gone to like a concert with Elton John and I look around and people have their phones going. I'm thinking, you can watch this on YouTube.
Right.
and it'll be better than on your phone. So what are you capturing and missing the moment of now?
Right.
You know, these musicians are playing for you now. So be here in the moment now. I appreciate going to like Jazz Alley in Seattle, where they tell you, don't bring your phone out.
Right.
There's that's a great piece, Mardig. I remember people lined up at the beach in Maui looking at the sunset with through their. I got 100 people. I got a picture of the 100 people lined up looking at the sunset through their camera. But I wanted to bring up the fact that you were a performing band or you were a studio band. You know, it was like very difficult to cross. That was the problem for the band. It was, you know, we had the mentorship of Boettcher and Olson, and like Mardig said, we embraced that. But lacking that, we wouldn't have stood a chance. And even then, you know, what were our chances? But the point is that if you're dyed-in-the-wool performance, it's very hard to cross over to that recording thing. And a lot of the, you know, the Monkees and a lot of these manufactured groups just came out, they never were in performance, right? And so if you were a brilliant writer of music and you did develop a following, it was very difficult to get noticed, you know. So I mean, the studios or archives are full of, you know, wonderful music that'll never see commercial play because, you know, they didn't have the payola or whatever it takes to kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah.
But really, my fundamental point is two businesses: the recording business and the performance business.
Yes.
And it's interesting that the to make money, the record companies would want you to go out and do concerts. Yeah. You know, once you had that hit.
Right.
But anyway, we got to breach it a little bit with our backup.
Yeah. Let me put to both of you the question: which did you prefer more, the recording and the songwriting and the pre-production and all that, or the performing live? Which floated your boat?
Well, Marty's thinking, and I know I can almost be the fly on the wall in his mind because there's merit to both. I mean, you can't replace the fun we had on the road, even though I mean, we remember the fun times, and a lot of the times the brutal things become your best memories later. I mean, those that generated the stories and the live recognition. There's nothing quite like, you know, right, people appreciating you on stage. There's nothing quite like that.
Immediate gratification. That immediate.
Yeah. Having said that, both of us were real clear on that. We were writers. You know, we liked creating music. And the idea, and to this day, I think two things. One is to create a thing, you know, that has its own legs. You know, I mean, the stories are the stories, but the music can have a life of its own, and you're kind of making your mark in history, so to speak. And that whole studio experience where you're kind of dissecting things, as Mardig well described earlier, you know, and creating this thing, which is it's like a work of art, and it's, you know, so many. It's left brain, right brain. There's the technical aspect, there's the artistic aspect. So there's just a lot to recommend that process. And so I liked them both, but I would say that the recording part is where, you know, that's where you could potentially not only make your mark by creating this thing, but the dream that we always had was residuals. You know, you make it once and then you get paid for it over and over again. And, you know, and we've never gotten a dime in residuals.
Okay. Not one. In fact, even with Gear Fab, I told, I can't remember the man's name anymore, but
Roger something?
When we did the contract, yeah. And I said, look, I don't care if it's $12. Just once, I'd love to get paid a residual check. Just once. I'd love to see a check from a record company that actually paid me. And no money. No residuals for you. So yeah, well, you know, I mean, many bands in those days, of course, did, you know, get badly screwed by record companies and their accounting and what you paid for, but they ran the show. You know, if you didn't have a label and they didn't do it for you and release you, then you didn't get there. Today, what's kind of sad is musicians still don't get paid for their music. you know, Spotify and all of that is absurd. I mean, it's ridiculous that they still, the way they make money is to go out and do concerts, you know, and live gigs, which of course is the way we made our money. But, you know, there's something really wrong with that. But it is, you know, once again, now the good news is that talent today can get themselves discovered because we have this. You can put it out on Instagram. You can put it on the net. You can put it on YouTube. You know, there's ways that there's outlets now. You can have a little studio in your own house, you know, a Billie Eilish.
Right, right.
Yeah, you know, Michael has a complete setup. He has to mix all kinds of music, you know, too. So, you know,
better what I have right now than what we hawked our soul to, you know, sign away our life for back then. Sorry, Mardig, I interrupted you.
No, go ahead. Yeah. I mean, that's right. You know, and you can, like you said, how about during COVID? Did you guys do a lot of composing and that kind of thing, because you couldn't perform and you couldn't do anything out there anyway?
Oh, we were long gone from then. We'd given up performing when what was 69 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about in 2002 with that album? Did you guys do any?
So what the genesis of that's a great question, Greg, because the genesis of that is I was going online searching the Bards and found us mentioned in a book or article or something. I guess it was a book, Bands of the Northwest, something like that, and followed a link and got to a compilation where, you know, there was some of our music, and I ordered it and called the guy, and I said, well, I didn't call him. I put in the little notes that you could put in the order. I said, gee, that's our music, and if you have any more of it, I'd like to know about it. And he called me, and he says he knew that we were affiliated with Curt Boettcher, that we'd had this that there was an album in the can that never got released, and that was the genesis of the Moses Lake recordings, and that ultimately drove us to get together and ultimately do our little concert thing in Moses Lake, which was really a trip.
Okay. All right.
They put us in the museum, Greg.
Well, was as they say, was the magic still there? All you guys performing, getting together, was the magic still there?
You know, it really was. Now Bob is gone. Bob passed away some time ago. But the three of us got together. There is a natural kind of chemistry.
Yeah.
That's still, all these years later, is still there, which is really nice. You know, there's no ill will or problem or anything, you know, at all. Yeah, I mean, we just, of course, we have a ball, because then we also tell the stories that maybe we wouldn't share here, you know, but,
Right.
you know, some of those, and laughing about each other, you know, laughing about stuff. And yeah, it was quite unusual actually to actually play. We played outside at a reunion, at the 1964 reunion or something like that. We played a couple songs. I played with Chuck and his band at my own reunion about 4 years ago, I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago. And I played the whole night with the band. We played a lot of we didn't play the Bards creative, but we played Never Too Much Love and the Owl and the Pussycat, you know, and some things like that. But you know, I mean, it's if Bob was still here, I'm not sure that we would reform the band, but I'm sure it would still be just as warm, you know, as it was. Mike's wife got us all together. What year was that we came? Was that?
I think I just turned 40, so it was date myself here 25 years ago.
A long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago.
And that was nice to be together.
Yeah.
So there's always, you know, I mean, I guess the answer to your question is, yeah, we still really enjoy each other and still feel tight, and we're launching a new website. Okay. In a few weeks. We have a web designer, because the one you were on, Mike put together years ago. He just kind of struggled and put it together. And we finally decided, you know, I mean, we can afford it. Let's spend a little bit of money, and it's a vanity thing, but we get hits all the time and people want to see it. And I thought, you know, it's our legacy. So let's make a nice site. So she's putting it together, and the three of us have come together, which helps, which is a reason for us to get together and share, you know, things and stories and pictures and all that kind of stuff. So
Right, right.
we will, by the way, we will for sure put a link on, you know, that brings people to this interview as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. I will send you it once I get it edited, and it should usually takes a week or so. But I was going to ask you too about hearing from your fans. I bet that feels good after all this.
We do.
Yeah.
Every once in a while.
Yeah. I do. Of course, see, I'm in Seattle, so I'm still in the Northwest where, you know, and sometimes, you know, it'll come up in a social situation of some kind. And of course, it's all people, you know, my age and stuff. And they'll say something like, well, what band were you in? And I'll say the Bards, and they will go, I think I remember you. I heard of you. And then I always say, how old are you? You know, and are you from the Northwest? You know, and if they're the right age and they're from the Northwest, they say, yeah, you know who we are. You know, like, you're not mixing us up with the Birds, you know. No, it's the Bards. Other people, it probably is going the Bard, but you know, yeah, we were, you know, this was our, you know, we owned the Northwest. We were one of the bands that did. We had the #1 selling record in the Northwest. I don't know when that record was broken. I'm sure it was, you know, when the big bands and grunge hit and everything. But for many years, even including, and I love her to death, Marilee had a wonderful song, you know, Angel of the Morning.
Yeah, Marilee.
She did a fabulous job of and it was a hit, you know, bless her heart. You know, it still makes me mad. Like, you know, people will do it on like The Voice or something, and they don't mention it's Marilee. It'll be some, you know, later artist that did it. And I was like,
yeah, you know,
Marilee that did that. You know, she's the girl that made that big, and she did. But even we outsold her.
Yeah. It's interesting how the first version you hear of a song is the one that you equate until you find out otherwise, that it wasn't the original. You know, you think, oh, okay, well, this was the, you know, and I was talking to a guy the other day interviewing, and I was like, my first version of hearing Walk, Don't Run, the first one I heard was Herb Alpert, you know, the Tijuana Brass.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And so, of course, until I found out it wasn't, they didn't originally do it, you know, then I was like, oh, always equating it to Herb Alpert, you know, but that's
yeah, but it was really the Ventures. Well, speaking of that, by the way, we were the first band to do Good Time Charlie's Got the Blues.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was the flip side of a Jim Webb song. After we had Never Too Much Love, the label said you have to do another record like that. So they gave us, you know, Jim Webb, you know, a tune called Tunesmith, which was a nice song, but a poppy piece of crap, really. And but on the flip side was Danny's song, Good Time Charlie's Got the Blues, which we recorded. And in those days, the lyric was, you're not a kid at 20, you're not a kid at 22.
Right.
And we were the first one, and we begged the label, we begged them to release it. And they said, no, it's not a hit.
It's not a hit. Yeah, Mike, I read that you thought the Danny's cover should have been the A side along with the band.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely the one that had artistry from our point of view. I agree totally with what Mardig just said. I mean, Jim Webb, but it wasn't our.
Wasn't
cover.
us.
No.
Wasn't us.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm sure Danny's happy that we didn't play that, you know, because he got to have it as a hit, and it is his song after all. But yeah, we were definitely right about that. That should have been the A side, and it was not. And I think we did a lovely job of it, if I do say so myself. So,
right. Well, you know, I found with singles and 45s, usually it's the band that prefers the B side. Maybe that, you know, that's the song that they enjoy making and creating, and it's the record company that is pushing the A side, you know.
And they don't know, you know. I mean, I get crazy about A&R guys from record companies and, you know, what they think is right. But we were there on the scene playing that music, and we would feel the response. And people loved that song. We loved the song. That's why we did it. It wasn't our song. We didn't write it, but we loved it and we wanted to do it. And so we used to play it live and people just loved it. And that's why we recorded it.
Yep. So if there's a song, a record that could, if we were going to recut something that would be, the Bards kind of thing, poetry put to music, pop sound, that really never got attention that I think it should have. It's for me personally, it's Jabberwocky.
Yeah,
Mardig, I love your voice on that, and it's such a cool tune, and I don't know.
That was so much fun to write because it was so because I had to interpret that non-lyric or the nonsensical lyric. I had to interpret it because it's really a story. It's this kind of wonderful story, and so singing it was. I know. Thank you, Mike. When I hear it today, I think, God, it's kind of cool that we did that. I mean, Lewis Carroll and Edward Lear and Dr. Seuss.
But it's a beautiful song,
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah. Well, you guys, what kind of side interest, or what kind of things do you have that keep you busy today besides your work? What kind of hobbies and side interests do you guys have?
Well, Mike, you want to go first?
Sure. So I ended up, it's like old rock and roll guys never die. They just end up in real estate. And I was one of them. And I always quip that, it's a lot like real estate is a lot like rock and roll because you work evenings and weekends, get paid on a performance basis, and it's kind of smile and move around to pull that back in. But I've evolved to where I ended up master's in educational psychology, counseling. I developed a training program, which I've been teaching for the last 25 years for Sotheby's International Realty here locally. But the creative juice still flows. Mardig and I keep threatening to do stuff. I've got some stuff in the can that I've never done anything, and I'd love to get Mardig involved with. For my personal creativity today, I need to get back into some more music, but I've applied it to, and Mardig's kind of runs a parallel track he'll tell you about. But I got into a thing called storyography, where they're like 3-minute videos of somebody's story, not hypey, but it's like a real estate practitioner to tell their story, where you kind of pull the heartstrings and sort of make their story come alive in 3 minutes or less. So the video incorporate, the music, you have to be selective that it sort of matches the cadence of their speech. And I'm not just like I wasn't a great website builder. I don't hold myself out as a videographer, but I know how to edit. I can do multi-track, and so I've had fun creatively with storyography. Matter of fact, you can go to storyographyfilms.com, and there's 50 of my things there now.
Our viewers, yeah.
But Mardig, I want to hear your snapshot.
Yeah, but it's really nice not to feel kind of hurried to have to get through things and stuff. So it is fun, and I'm really glad too that you invited Mike to come too, because we have fun because we remember off of each other. We kind of riff off of each other when we do that. So
and Mike, I forgot to mention in the beginning, thank you for working, doing this in such short notice too. Like the day before.
Yeah, absolutely honored. Glad it worked out. And by the way, kudos to your process. I think you're very skilled at, like you say, you got a kind of chronology, but you bring something up and then you kind of let us run, and then you kind of bring us back, and you're doing a fine job as an interviewer, I believe.
I appreciate that. I've heard comments like that. I'm gonna pat myself on the back, but no, seriously, I do hear that, and that's what I want it to be about. I hit the record button, and you guys just kind of run with it. Basically, it's what I want, and throw in questions, every once in a while, but for the most part, I just want you guys to tell your story.
I love to hear, and a lot of times I really relate. To other musicians, their stories, whether they're really, really famous guys or, just guys like us that had a shot at it and had some fun and did okay and had a few minutes in the limelight. And, I went on and I stayed, I stayed kind of close after, but it was, you know, it was, we'd been up, you know, we'd been at the, almost at the top of the mountain. And I was in another band that was fabulous, beautiful, wonderful musicians, another band that broke up. Even as we were hitting a pinnacle of it wasn't like the Bards, but because it was later, but a pinnacle of music appreciation. We were very, very tight, musically adept. All of them went on to you know, I mean, they went on and got one with Leon Russell and Joe Chimay, who's really a big studio cat in Nashville, and you know, they went on. But I remember the night they broke up, when we were traveling home, actually from Spokane. We were traveling home, and we just had this big concert with John Mayall and Blown the Roof Off, and it was like, I was thinking, yeah, finally again, we're going to make it. And the pianist, one of the singers, says, well, I'm leaving the band. And then the other two guys, Joe Chimay and Mike Maros, who went with the Beach Boys, they said, yeah, we're leaving too. And I sat there and I thought, I can't let my life be at the whim of flaky musicians. Right. I can't do it. I just can't, you know, and that was it. And I played for a while with the band that we would play after game dances and divide up the money afterwards. And it was like where I started, and I went, you know, I gotta go. I gotta do, I can't be like too many musicians today, you know, in their 60s and 70s playing piano bar, like a guy I know that was playing the piano at the restaurant I was at the other night. And you know, I just thought I can't do that. But I did stay. I went in the film, TV, radio, television, was a director for a while. Been writing on screenplay work, and you know, keeping my fingers in it that way, and playing and stuff. But I ended up as the dreaded corporate corporate consultant in strategy and people stuff. And I still do some of that. I mean, today I like to call selective retirement. So I do still work, but on my terms and only with the clients that are established and I want to, because I'm, you know, happily, fortunately, don't have to work anymore. But I find that if I'm not using my brain and my ability and, you know, playing music, and I'm studying Spanish with the teacher, you know, if you don't stay vital and alive and keep moving and stay engaged, you know, I've seen too many of my friends of my same age. Yeah. And I mean, they're like they're leaving, you know, or I mean, that reunion I was talking about, they asked me to be the greeter. And honest to God, I'm not exaggerating. I was standing at the door, and I remember seeing some people get out of the car, and they were helping, and one person had a walker and stuff. And I thought, oh, that's nice. Somebody brought their parents. Right. And it was my classmates. Yeah. Right. You know, and it was like, I'm not going that way.
No. My dad passed away a few years ago of Alzheimer's, and he did not keep his mind active. He didn't. He regretted the old days. He thought too much of the past, and he was not doing things to stay active, to keep his mind going, you know.
I heard this is really, really important. I was watching a TED Talk, a woman who is a professor at University in Vancouver, up in BC, and she studies the brain. And she was talking about the need to be learning, and how when you're learning, and she was talking about the actual neuropathic the things that happen in your brain as a result. It's like exercise. It's like you building pathways and the wraps around the neuron in your brain. I mean, I don't understand it, but I mean, I'm watching. And she said, but you have to be learning something that's hard to learn, that you have to stay at it. So you can't, short-term learning doesn't do it. It has to be something that requires you to stay in it, like studying Spanish, as I am now, a new language. And she said it definitely contributes to people staying healthier longer and keeping their brain and their cognitive functions. Right. You know, it really is. You gotta keep smiling and moving around, man.
Right, Mike. That's right. That's right. Well, it's been a real pleasure, you guys. Sharing, you know, you guys sharing so much, and
well, your timing is really good, because as Mardig said, and it's really to his credit, he's the one that's really got the juice on this new website, and I've gotten excited about it now, vicariously, and then now genuinely seeing what can be done, putting juice back into it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing us together. This is fun. It really was fun. So thank you.
And we'll be in touch, and I'll send you over the link once I get it edited down a little bit. And again, peace to you guys.
Oh, yeah. Peace.
Yeah.